Thanks very much, Elise. Nelson Mandela has a saying, education is the most powerful tool that we can use to change the world. And I absolutely applaud each and every one of you for your passion to making sure that your children and children in remote and rural areas of Australia have an education. A child without an education is like a bird without wings. It can't see the potential or be inspired by the possibilities. And I have a dream where rural families have access to the same education opportunities as people in the cities, and where the spirit of people from the bush is understood and celebrated. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this country, the Noongar people, and I'd like to celebrate their culture and history, both from the past, but also into the future, and acknowledge elders past and present. I also wanted to start by acknowledging the wonderful work of Liz Sudlow, Judy Newton, Elise McKeough, the convener of this conference, and also to acknowledge Margaret Hoare in the room, who I believe was the first West Australian president of ICPA and is a life member. Today, what I'm hoping to share with you is my take on the theme spirit. And I want to go further than that. I'd really like to challenge you all to think about what is it that you're going to do with your spirit? How are you going to make a difference? When I first hear the word spirit, the resounding voice in my head screams rural people. I think spirit is epitomised by rural people and the energy and the tenacity and the passion and the imagination, the creativity, the resourcefulness that we have by being out in the bush. I've been very blessed to have travelled this beautiful country of ours, and actually I've been very lucky because I've done a little bit of that internationally as well. And I have probably met some of the most sparkly, passionate, imaginative, resilient, high integrity and tenacious people that I could ever imagine. So I feel very, very blessed, and they're all in rural and remote Australia. So spirit stands for sparkle, passion, imagination, resilience, integrity and tenacity. And my take on those are sparkle. It's what makes the world go round. It's what gives things energy. Passion is a compelling enthusiasm or a desire for something. Imagination is the capacity to form new ideas and do things a little bit differently. Resilience is to recover from difficulties and spring back into shape quickly. Integrity is a quality of being honest and having a high moral compass. And tenacity is to hold on or grip something tightly and with determination. So I thought I'd start by just sharing a little bit of my story. I know a few of you around the room, so it's nice to have some familiar faces, but some of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. So I just thought I'd give a little bit of my background to the girl in the blue dress standing out the front. It might help you understand a little bit about where my passion for rural Australia comes from. So I grew up on a sheep farm over in Victoria, so it's quite strange that I would end up in the northern beef industry, but that's where my dreams took me. So growing up on a sheep farm, or growing up on a farm, you have the most amazing freedoms, and you have freedoms to make choices, you have freedoms to make mistakes, and then you live with the circumstances or the consequences of those choices that you make. As kids, we used to work for $2 an hour if we were drenching sheep or shearing or foot pairing or mulesing or anything like that. We weren't paid $2 an hour if we were mustering, because that was on a horse or a motorbike, so Mum considered that to be fun. And also, she didn't. If we weren't diligent and kept our little hours in a wages book, we weren't paid because she couldn't remember if she hadn't signed off on it. So we learned about budgeting pretty early. We found out, by making choices and doing stupid things. I think all country kids do silly things from time to time. But we found out, I used to ride my horse 10 k's up a dirt road to school and back, and I'd keep it in the churchyard and ride it home in the afternoons. And I never had a saddle because $2 an hour is not going to buy you one of them in a real hurry, let's face it. So I used to ride bareback, and as I'm one of 4 kids, so we used to do things like, Mum would say, don't put any fire near the diesel. So, of course, we did, and we found out that that was explosive. And then we found out that petrol is actually more so. And if you douse a shearing shed brush in petrol and put bullets in it, and then a line on the ground of petrol to where you're standing behind corrugated tin, and you light it, it'll go off, and they all go off like a shot, but you're safe as houses because you're behind the corrugated tin that you've just pulled off the woolshed roof. Mum was chuffed with us all. But anyway, so I loved being a bush kid. The freedom, the space, the energy, the open air was just something that I feel very, very blessed and privileged to have had the upbringing that I did. Following school, I went to university and I studied a Bachelor of Rural Science. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture. And upon completion of my degree, I went and was a Jillaroo up in Queensland. So I had a 4-year science degree and sat in a saddle for 12 months. And the reason that I did that is because I knew I wanted to be involved in the northern beef industry. And I'm a believer in the fact that if you want to be involved in something, it's helpful if you understand it from the ground up. Coming from a sheep farm in Victoria didn't very well equip me for knowing the intricacies of the northern beef industry, but I knew that's where I wanted to be. So I went and Jillarooed for 12 months. And following that, I worked as a nutritionist in the northern beef industry for 10 years. So the last 5 of those years, I was working in the live export industry. So I got some very, very fabulous friends and I got some very, very fabulous enemies doing that. But it was the most amazing journey and I feel so just excited and humbled that I've been able to have those experiences. In the live export industry, I specialised obviously in ruminant nutrition, but I very quickly learnt that I can be the best nutritionist in the world, which just quietly I'm clearly not. But unless people are managing their cattle properly, it doesn't matter what ration I formulate. If the cattle aren't being fed at the right times, the bunks aren't being cleaned, they're not being handled, they're not being hospital treated properly, that sort of thing, it didn't matter. So I ended up going over there to do nutrition and I ended up doing feedlot management, breeding programs, animal handling schools. After the live export suspension, I was also doing abattoir risk analysis and auditing to make sure that our animal welfare was constantly improving. And I really, really loved that. As a result of the live export suspension, I started up a company called Influential Women as a result of my participation in the Rurdic Rural Women's Award, so the Rural Industries Research and Development Corporation Rural Women's Award, which is being announced tonight, actually in Perth, so we'll have to keep our ear out for who the winner is this year. But what I did is with that live export suspension, I got cross. Sure, I got cross. I was like, how could you be so ridiculous? But then I sort of took a step back and I was like, okay, so how did this happen? Why did this happen? And what can I do about it? And I had a look around and I did an environmental scan and every piece of media that came out, farmers were starting a conversation from a place of defence. So we were aggressive or defensive to start, and as far as I'm concerned, that's not a place to start a conversation. You'll never win or win people over in support. And the other thing that I noticed is there were no women. Kirsty Forshaw did a stellar job. Kirsty and Annabelle were taking one for the team, which was fantastic. But I knew that we had a country full of women that had something to say, that are intelligent and driven and confident and everything, but for some reason just didn't have that little bit they needed to step up. So I started Influential Women to build confidence and capacity in leadership and communication in rural women so that together we can stand beside our men and contribute at that leadership end and at that representative end. I now have been given a couple of opportunities which I'm really excited about, and I can't tell you about one of them, but it's very exciting. But I've got 2 federal boards that I'm on and a half, but I can't tell you about the half. And they're all to do with Indonesia, and I'm working, and I found my way back into the cattle industry. So I'm on the Australian-Indonesian Partnership for Food Security in the red meat and cattle sector, which is working with Indonesian and Australian politicians and private sector to try and build relations with Indonesia, which is, let's face it, a little fractured at the minute. And the other one that I'm on is the ACR Commission, so the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. And I'm absolutely loving this chapter of my life. So doing a little bit of political advocacy, a little bit of strategy on behalf of Australian agriculture internationally. And I love talking to people like you guys and getting your ideas because it's you that I represent. And I want to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can. So I've lived in agriculture and worked in agriculture my entire life, and I reckon I've probably had one of the best lives out there. I absolutely love every day I wake up and just feel very chuffed to be where I am. So I thought I'd start by breaking down spirit. So the first letter in spirit is S, and that stands for sparkle. And I think, where would we be in life without our sparkle? I think everything that we do in life needs a little bit of vibrancy. I mean, you think about the beautiful things in life. We've got nothing better than a beautiful open night sky with the sparkle of the stars up in the atmosphere or the Milky Way. Sorry, I'm ruminating. You see the sparkle of the cobwebs in the morning that the spiders build between the ring lock and the fence, and the sparkle when the light hits that is something really, really beautiful and special. Or it might be something as simple as the sun shining and glinting off the water on a river or a dam or the ocean. I think that the world we live in, we need sparkle to survive. If things don't have sparkle, then it's very, very dull and non-sparkly. But something that keeps me sparkling every day is to have a good laugh. I think, we can take ourselves very, very seriously, and that will take the sparkle out of anybody, I think, because if you take yourselves too seriously, it's, you get really stressed. I like to hang out with people that are positive. I like to hang out with people that have courage, that show their vulnerability, that are good at telling stories, that are generous and caring. And that to me epitomises sparkle. It's sort of beyond the physical thing. It's more an energy thing. And you can see, people's eyes when they smile and they sparkle, and that is just such a gift. It gives you a lift. It's funny, really, with my passion for sparkle, that I would end up working with rural women, who are some of the sparkliest little beings that I know. So to be completely sparkly, though, it has to come from within yourself. So you have to believe in your sparkle that you have within you. And if for that to be the case, sometimes it takes a little bit of self-care. If you don't believe that you're sparkly within yourself, you can put on a little bit of sparkle to start with, but eventually you're going to come unstuck. And I know this from personal experience, because towards the end of last year, I became very unsparkly. I got very tired and worn out. And to be honest, I don't know what depression is, but I was pretty much there, I'm pretty sure. Like, it was not a very pretty situation for me to be in. And I realised, like, some people would look at me and they're like, but Catherine, why would you lose your sparkle? You've got freedom, you work for yourself, you don't have a boss, you get to travel, you get to stay in hotels, you're a platinum frequent flyer, what could possibly be wrong? But it's interesting because quite often we hide our lack of sparkle by putting sparkle on the outside and not having sparkle on the inside. And so what I did is I realised that I had become addicted to getting sparkle from everybody else. So I'd present, I'd work, I'd do all this stuff, and the people in the community or whatever would be like, oh, Catherine, you're wonderful, you're fabulous. And I'm like, oh, that's good, I've still got sparkle. Whereas inside I was dying. I was just like, I'm tired. I don't know if all this is worth it. It's a really, really horrible place to be. And I think that that's a trap that a lot of people, particularly the contributing people in rural communities, end up. You put on a face to the public, which is sparkly, but inside you're exhausted and you're tired and you think, oh, I just need a break. So for me, I had to go and find my inner sparkle, because it doesn't matter how much sparkle you get from outside. If you don't believe it within yourself, you're going to come unstuck. So I took myself away for a month and I found my inner sparkle again. I turned off my phone and my computer and I did it unapologetically, because people look up to me to be a leader. And I thought, well, I don't want to be a leader that is leading the way and people think, oh, I want to be a leader, I've got to be like Catherine, I've got to work my butt off and not give myself a break. So I turned my phone off. And my sister, actually, I shouldn't really say this, but Hannah said, oh, what are you going to say on your voice message? And I said, oh, I'm going to say that I'll be back in February and I'd like to talk to you then. And she goes, no, you just say, hi, you've called Catherine, I don't really care until February, have a nice day. I was like, Hannah, I can't say that. But anyway, I needed to. And what I realised when I was away is that if I want to maintain my inner sparkle, I need to set some personal boundaries. I need to get some self-care involved in there. So I did, and I got a little self-care plan for myself, and it's really simple, but I do it every day. So every day I meditate for 10 minutes every morning, and I do my little exercises, my push-ups and sit-ups and stuff, and I also came up with a plan that I don't work between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. I do lots of work then. So I also have a nighttime job. No. And I try and really stick to that. So if I find myself working outside those hours, I question myself. I'm like, Catherine, you're doing it again. You're becoming inefficient. So something needs to change. But I think when you're losing your inner sparkle, it's change is absolutely paramount. You need to change something. And it might be something simple like picking up the phone and calling a friend that you haven't for ages. It might be something about changing your routine in the morning, or changing some staff, or changing the way that your schoolroom looks. It might be setting aside one night a month to have a date night with your husband. But just something that is going to recharge your inner sparkle, because for rural people and rural contributors in communities, it is such a shame when you lose your inner sparkle, because you can keep your outside sparkle going for a little while, but eventually it will dim. And I can tell you now, the world is nowhere near as vibrant a place when rural people lose their sparkle. So that's my little thing about sparkle, is look after yourselves. The next one is passion. So the P in Spirit stands for passion. And I think you guys have got it in spades. I think with regards to passion, it's kind of like butterflies. You know when you get nervous in your tummy? What you've got to do is teach your passion to fly in formation, take you where you need to be. Because they say that if you're passionate about what you do in life, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that that is a fantastic thing to live by. It's with regards to your passion, I sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed by my passion because I'm passionate about so many things, and you sort of sit back and you're like, oh gosh, but what is it that I'm actually really passionate about? And it's important that we recognise that you can actually be passionate about a lot of different things, but you aren't able to fulfil all of those passions all at the same time. So, you know, sometimes you can become overwhelmed and exhausted with all of your passions. But if you think of people that you know that are passionate about something, they stick to that something and they do it really well, rather than being overwhelmed by other passions. It doesn't mean that that's all they're going to do, but it means when they're passionate about that thing, they do it really, really well. So you look at the likes of Nelson Mandela. Now, he was passionate about equality. So that's what he is known for. Then you look at people like Elise McKeough. And she's passionate, she just ducked. She's passionate about rural communities. We've got Kirsty Forshaw, who I know is absolutely passionate about the northern beef industry and live export. And we've got Roxanne Morrissey in the room, who I know is passionate about ICPA, and what a difference all of those people are making in that space. It's really interesting because in my workshops, one of the questions that I ask when I get people to introduce themselves is, what are you passionate about? And it's unreal that a lot of people go, well, I don't know. I don't know what I'm passionate about. And it's this sort of thing that you've got to be passionate about something. Well, you know, do you? Like, yes, I believe that you do, but don't put so much pressure on yourselves. I think with regards to passion, I think rural people share a lot of passions. I'm passionate, for example, about sustainable environments. I'm passionate about eating and producing healthy food. I'm also passionate about photography. I'm passionate about working cattle and horses. I'm passionate about travel. I'm passionate about people that have different cultural backgrounds to me. I'm passionate about learning. I'm passionate about music and trying, like heck, to teach myself guitar off YouTube at the moment. It's not pretty. I do live by myself. When I'm home, I'm by myself, so it's okay. And I think that all of you probably share a lot of those passions. But, you know, how do you address all of those passions and be effective? Well, the answer is that you don't at the same time. There's periods in your life where you can concentrate on different passions, and it's okay to change them. So I am still, and always have been, very passionate about the cattle industry. But for 10 years, that was the passion that I chose, and I took that very, very seriously. And I'd like to think that I made some difference. I then moved and changed because the environment around me changed, and I thought, rightio, so now I can channel my passion for rural women. And so I've been doing that for 3 years. But then as my passion has changed and the environment that I'm working in has changed again, I've become passionate now about political engagement and advocacy on behalf of rural Australia, not only to the federal and state level, but also internationally. And so I'm able to do that. While I was fulfilling my passion for rural women, I had to let my passion for the cattle industry go a little bit. And that's okay, because your passions can change and flex and move with the environment that you work in. I think it's fairly fair to say that at the moment, all of you would be fairly passionate about educating your kids. And celebrate that. Do it. It is the most important job on the planet, to provide and fight for your kids and your children, and their education is the most important thing that you can do. I think often what we do in life is we compare ourselves to other people. And, you know, people say to me always, oh, but Catherine, you're off doing this and you're doing that and I'm just educating my children. I'm like, whoa, just cut that out. Straight up, that's not okay. But educating your children is the most amazing thing that you can do. And what people do when they say things like that is that they're comparing themselves to somebody else. And you can't be somebody else. Be yourself. The world needs you for who you are, your skills, your experiences, and what you have to offer. And if educating your children at the moment is it, run with it. Because I can tell you right now, educating children is the most important thing that anybody can do and invest in. It's, you know, when we compare ourselves to other people, there's always going to be someone who's smarter, prettier, shorter, fatter, more rich, more poor, has a bigger station, more cattle, better kids, you know, whatever it is. And you can become, well, I don't know what better kids are. My poor mother missed out, bless her. No, but it's, you know, you can't live your life comparing yourself to other people because you'll never be happy. There's always going to be someone who's better or got more than you do. And I think Oscar Wilde probably summed it up the best when he said, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. And I love it. I love that saying so much. I think, like with where you're at the moment, and I'm hoping to be able to represent you, I'm so proud of all of you for your passion and your dedication for educating not only Australia's future, but agriculture and rural Australia's future. So if I can get you all to give yourselves a round of applause, that'd be great. Imagination is the next thing, and I think ICPA promotes imagination really, really well. Another way that you can look at imagination is creativity or resourcefulness. And the environment that you all work and live in, being remote, fundamentally means that you have to be resourceful, you have to be creative, and you have to be skilled. You have to deal with, like, you know, most business people do. You've got challenges. You've got things like floods, droughts, market access, high cost of inputs, market drivers, political forces, consumer pressure. But with the imagination the cumulative imagination that we have not only in this room but in rural Australia, I have a firm belief that our industry is in very, very safe hands. I learnt about the imagination capacity of people in remote and regional, or not regional, I grew up in regional, but rural and remote Australia when I went up to work on Iffley Station in the Gulf of Queensland. And I couldn't believe it. I still can remember the starkness of this realisation about the fact that you have to be resourceful in the bush. And what happened, we went down to the yards and we had to water all the yards, and one of the sprinkler heads had come off. And we needed to fix it because otherwise water just spouts out and it was buggered. So we went back to the shed and we had to get a 2-inch male part that had a bit in the middle. I don't know the technical terms, but basically we had to get a 2-inch male end, stick the sprinkler in it and we'd be away. But we didn't have it. So we had this box of poly and gal. We ended up with a joiner that was no joke, about 75 centimetres long, and it was made out of gal and poly, and the outside of it went like this. It went in and out with male and female bits and double adapter bits and all sorts of things. But anyway, we whacked it on there and it worked. And I thought, holy hatbox, like at home on our farm, if we didn't have the bit of poly that we need, just drive into town. It's only 12 k's away and get it. So you don't have to think, you don't have to be imaginative, you don't have to be creative. But out on cattle stations in remote areas, you absolutely have to be. Another topical thing that I wanted to sort of cover off on with using your imagination is lobbying government. It's really, really important to look at the environment that you're working in with regards to lobbying government, because you don't want to be the same as everybody else when you're going to lobby politicians. Because 90% of people that go to lobby politicians go in there with a problem and a whinge and a bitch and how something's not good enough for them. Yeah? So don't be that person. When you look at sort of the environment we're working in, the government has got to cut costs. We have been living in Australia beyond our means, I believe, for quite some time. So the government needs to cut costs. This means that we need to get imaginative with our engagement with our political leaders. And that might mean speaking from a different standpoint, or maybe having some empathy, trying to understand what it is that the politicians need to help us with what we want, or indeed need. So we need to, pardon? No, that's all right. So we have to get imaginative and we have to create empathy with our language. Let's face it, it wouldn't be a speech of Catherine's if I didn't manage to wangle language in here somewhere. Because my big thing is that language is able to shape the perceptions that you form, and perceptions shape feelings and beliefs is what people are going to act on every single time they make a decision. So I used to do things like I used to get my hair cut here in Fremantle. And Fremantle is a beautiful part of the world, but they're a little bit hippie, perhaps. And so I used to sit and get my hair cut, and I would talk at the top of my lungs about my role in the East Asian beef industry. True. And I used to say to them, oh, and it's wonderful, I work with farmers on the ground and I'm improving animal welfare and I'm doing this, and oh, we're helping them with their breeding, and oh my goodness, it's so wonderful. I taught them how to grow veggies the other day, that was great. And, you know, and I talked to them about all the positive changes that we were making by working in the Asian beef industry. And about 15 minutes later, without a shadow of a doubt, someone would pipe up and go, gosh, you must hate the live export industry. I'm like, oh, that's the industry I'm talking about, actually. That's the industry that I work in. Oh, well, heavens above, daggers start flying. But I had managed to use language to create a perception which allowed me to have a conversation. If I had walked in there and said, oh, yeah, I work in the live export industry, how far do you think I would have got? They would have shut me down straight away. Yeah. The scissors might have slipped. No. Anyway, but like what I want you to understand is that you can use those same concepts when we're trying to engage and create empathy with our politicians. So if you go to Canberra and you say, I want, I need, you need to do this, stop that, how far do you think we're going to get? They'll just shut you down. They switch off, ears off. Ooh. And they're not going to listen at all. So what do I mean by imagination within the role of spirit? I've become quite good friends with the Honourable Barnaby Joyce, the Federal Minister for Agriculture, and it is so lovely to meet a minister that actually genuinely cares about his portfolio. And he lives it, he breathes it, he genuinely wants to do the right thing. But what becoming good friends with Barnaby has enabled me to see is the way that the political system works. So he, you know, to me, the cattle industry is something I'm still really passionate about. So that's my world, is the cattle industry. And he has things from cattle to acorns, to lettuce, to fisheries, to forestry, to animal welfare complaints, legislation around biosecurity. He has trade within Australia and Coles and Woolworths. He also has trying to develop international relations. He's trying to decrease red tape while stop mining on the Liverpool plains and build bridges near Dubbo to get things to market. So then I come in and say, well, you need to do this for the cattle industry. And he's like, I beg your, what? So I said to him, I asked him in passing the other day, you know, Barnaby, what are we going to be doing about the the cattle industry at the moment with the politics around Cattle Council and ABA and MLA and everything? And he's like, Catherine, I don't have time to be dragged into this business. Find me a solution. And I thought, thank you, that's a gift right there. And we can use that gift with any engagement that we do. We need to be solutions focused rather than problems focused. And I read the submission that ICPA did to the Higher Education Bill, Amendment Bill, and it was awesome. You guys are to be absolutely congratulated. It was fantastic. I think when we're approaching politicians, there's a few things that we need to take into account, and it's not just what's in our own backyard. So we have a federal budget that's in trouble. We've got international relation issues all over the place. We've got a population that's more removed from rural Australia than they ever have been before. So 30% of our country was not born here. So we're not only geographically removed, we're generationally removed from rural Australia. We have a media sector that sells news based on negativity. So any story that rural Australia gets in mainstream media tends to be of negative, which puts us in a victim's mentality for people that are not lucky enough to be in agriculture. We live in a time which is really information rich and knowledge poor. And time poor. So people aren't actually really interested in anything unless it fundamentally affects them. We have politicians that are unaware of exactly what's going on in your backyard. So we need to have conversations. And we also have a blame mentality. And I think the blame mentality is interesting because it's human nature to blame someone else. It's much harder to look at yourself and go, ooh, what role did I play in that? It's really easy to blame broken relationships, broken systems, politics, market prices. You can blame your horse, your dog, the weather, blame your mother if you like, but fundamentally nothing's going to change unless you actually take some responsibility and decide that change is needed. In life we've got two options. We can keep things the same or we can create change. So if things aren't going the way that you want, instead of sitting back and blaming everything, go, okay, well, what can I do to create some change and move on from that? I've got a couple of examples of people that have really used their imagination to create change. Sue Daubney from Bannister Downs. Does anyone know Bannister Downs, the dairy milk? Yeah, so Sue was, like every dairy farmer, struggling with the milk prices and everything, and she was like, okay, well, I've made a choice, and that choice is that I want to be here. I want to be here and I want my children to have the option to farm if they want to. So she developed her own brand. She went to China, she found some funky packaging and thought, yep, I can pour milk out of that. So she did that. She then had started to market it herself and she had not enough supply. So she went and got another farmer to come in and help, and he was supplying her. Now she was paying 3 cents above market price, but she couldn't get any other farmers to help her or to supply her with milk because she was going to go bankrupt. She was going to go bust. She can't do it. Well, now she's got Gina Reinhardt, who's invested in Bannister Downs. So through imagination and ingenuity and creativity and some drive and determination, she's created a smashing business for herself and a great example for all of us to look to and go, well, you know what, I don't have to take no for an answer. The ICPA is another body that's giving solutions where solutions are needed. So they've put in the submission, as I said earlier, for the Higher Education and Research Reform Amendment Bill. And I've read it, and it was really, really positive and proactive. They're increasing their membership by offering collaborative voice for the way that people's ideas and whatnot in the bush. They're taking responsibility for you guys, sorry, when I say they, I mean you guys are all taking responsibility for the changes that you want to see in education. And you're lobbying politicians like mad, crazy people, and it's fantastic, and your voices are being heard. The next one is resilience. So that's the R in spirit. And I think resilience means to remain strong or bounce back after you've had some negative sort of reaction. So I don't know if you guys have heard of the live export industry. Animals Australia, drought, Christopher Pine, deregulation of universities, we've got challenges all around us. So if we want to stay here, we need resilience because everything will continue to change around us and create challenges. But challenges also present opportunities. It just depends how you choose to unwrap them. So one of the main things with regards to building resilience is that you don't have to do it on your own. To be resilient, it takes a community. Julie McDonald is a really good friend of mine, and a couple of years ago, unfortunately, she lost Xander McDonald, who was one of the most progressive, forward-thinking, dynamic people in the beef industry. And Julie is just such an inspiration. Julie and Xander actually gave me my first job in the northern beef industry, so they're very, very special people to me. And I just admire Julie. She, unfortunately, as I said, she lost Xander, and she was left with 4 young daughters and a station and a business and a big hole in that business because Xander's was the face and the ideas and everything, with alongside their family. And I said to Julie, sweet, I'm so proud of you. I just don't know how you do it. You're so resilient. You're so strong and courageous. And she said, Catherine, I couldn't do it on my own. There's no way. She said, my sister comes out and helps me and all of Xander's, all the McDonald family are there. And I thought, that's interesting, isn't it? Because resilience, it's okay to get help. To be resilient. I think there's, one person can be resilient, but if you've got 10 people that are resilient, your resilience is so much stronger because then somebody can have a bad day in that group and the rest of the group is able to pick them up. I think when I run workshops around the country, one of the biggest things that people get out of the 2 days is that they realise that they're not out there by themselves. There are other people. You've got sisters in arms, people that are facing the same challenges and having the same trials and tribulations. And that gives you some resilience and it gives you a determination to remain strong and keep working through the hard days. You can look around the room here and see that all of you are extremely resilient, strong, courageous and high energy people. And the industry is so much better off for having you all in it. I think that the language that we use can create or take away from the resilience that we feel in the bush. So headlines like, a couple of years ago there was a headline, and it was really good to see that most farmers got up in arms and went, no, this is not okay. But there was a headline on the front page of one of the newspapers, I can't remember which one, is ag dying? Now, do headlines like that promote pride and make you feel really proud of the industry that you're working in? Or does it make you go, oh, I don't know, why am I doing all this anyway? Life's pretty tough. So we need to be very, very careful with, again, the language that we use, because the language that we use can create a positive atmosphere, or it can create one that's a little bit of a struggle street and not so positive. So my belief is that in any conversation, positivity breeds positivity and negativity breeds negativity. So we have to be conscious of the language that we choose and our ideas and our imagination and our spirit, etc., and be conscious of the outcome that we have. I'm not saying that we need to be fake happy all the time, because that has no integrity, which clearly is something that is important to ICPA. But what I'm saying is just be aware of the language. And if somebody is having a down day, pick up the phone, give them a call, ask them, is everything all right? Because that's part of building resilience in your communities. So some ways that you can build resilience, days like this. Days like the ICPA and Rangelands NRM have put on today. I don't know about you guys, but I walk away with an absolute pep in my step and a spring in my thing, I don't know. Whatever. Because, you get energised. You've got like-minded people in the room that are passionate and caring and whatever. And that in itself builds resilience. You've got days like Rangelands NRM put on training days to help build environmental resilience. They've got funding available to do NRM projects that build resilience and then sustainability into the future. So without resilience, you have no sustainability. If you can't get to courses all the time, or you can't get out, there's a wonderful thing now called social media, which can drive you mad, but it can also be a beautiful gift, because if you are isolated, I lived on a farm south of here a couple of years ago, and I had no mobile service, no nothing, but I did have satellite internet. So I was able to decrease my social isolation by using social media, which kept me bucked along, and I'm excited to meet Raylene Hall. See Raylene Hall, we've been friends for ages on social media. She does a great job. So it's scary at first, but give it a crack, because it's a way that you can build resilience, not only within yourselves, but within your communities. Integrity is the second I, and it's about being honest and having strong moral principles. And I'm going to take a little bit of creative license, because I actually think inspiration also needs to be in there, so I thought I'd pop that in. And I've thought long and hard about the integrity one, and it is so important. And I think people from the bush have probably got some of the sharpest, most attuned BS detectors in the world, because if you've got no integrity, you're going to be talking a lot of BS, and you don't last long in the bush. So people in the bush have got some of the highest integrity of any person on the planet. I think integrity is really, really closely tied with trust. So if someone has no integrity, I'm certainly not going to trust them. And trust is really, really important in anything that we do. I think with regards to inspiration, something that is really, really important to me, and I'm sure to all of you, is sharing stories. You have all ended up in rural and remote Australia, and I can guarantee every single one of you here in this room will have a phenomenal story to share. And I would encourage you all to share those stories. I don't think there's any greater gift on the planet than being able to hear where people have come from, how they got where they've got, their struggles, their trials, their tribulations, their achievements, their vulnerabilities, their thoughts, their lessons, their experiences. Jane O'Fawkes-Taylor from Ewan Station this morning told us about how she grew up with School of the Air on an HF radio. I mean, how inspirational is that, just knowing what used to be and now what we've got now, and the fact that she's built and contributed over the years and is still contributing to this amazing industry. So, stories have so much capacity, and you never know when your story is going to give someone that pep in their step that they need to keep going. Books like People Like Us, that Kathy has pulled together, and the other people in ICPA. I can't wait to read that book, because it'll be all about people's stories. And when you hear and read of what people have been through and what they've achieved, you can't help but be inspired and uplifted. I'll share a couple of stories with you, which goes back to the sparkle and having a bit of a laugh at yourself. So I do a little bit of public speaking and quite often will come unstuck, as I did earlier. Before, I think I'm just saying something silly. I can't remember what I said, but everyone laughed. So I tell this story about working in Indonesia. And I work really hard and I now speak the language on and off. My grammar is appalling because I learned it in a feedlot, but people can understand me. But I was determined to teach myself the language because I thought if I'm over there, I want to respect their people and and I want to create change. So the change that I need to create is not with the managers in the office that speak English, it's with the blokes that are actually feeding the cattle and whatnot. And I was in the back of a feedlot one day and I needed to wee. And and I said to one of the ladies, "Oh, excuse me, can I please borrow your scooter? I know go and powder my nose." And I said it all in Indonesian and she's like, "Oh, yes, okay. Jump on my scooter and I'll take you." And I said, "Oh, fabulous, radio." So I less than graciously plop myself on the back of her scooter and we're flying along. It's about a K from the back of the feedlot up to the office and we're flying along, or putting, past all the cattle and I'm rubbernecking, having a look and making sure everything's okay. And she said to me in perfect English, she goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Marriot, but my motorbike is crying because you fat like 4 man." I was like, fabulous. I wasn't going to tell you the other one, but I will because it's funny. So there was another time that, I always used Annabelle Coppin, who's Anne Coppin, who I was thrilled to hear about earlier today. Annabelle's a really good mate of mine, Anne's daughter, and she comes from Yarri Station, cattle station in the Pilbara, and I'm from a sheep farm, but she ended up working with sheep in the Middle East, and I was with cattle in Indo, so we sort of mixed that up a little bit, but we were both happy. Anyway, we used to have a quote of the tournament where we'd come back and say, "Oh, this got said to me," and we used to just laugh. And this was another story where I was looking at stocking rates with cattle under palm and for breeding projects over there, and I had another Australian guy who was a consultant with me at the time, and I always used to tell him what I'd been told, and he's like, "Maz, they don't say things like that." I'm like, "They do. I couldn't make this up. I promise I'm not making it up." Anyway, I was talking to Pak Dwi, who was the breeding manager, and I said to him, we were looking at 2 legumes, and I said, "But Pak Dwi, you say that the cattle will eat this one, but they won't eat this one. To me, they look exactly the same." And he flipped one of them over, and he goes, "No, you see, Catherine, this one here, it has hair on it like your upper lip. They don't like this one." I was like, and Jamie, who was the bloke that was standing there with me, he's like, "Snap, that's totally one of those things, isn't it?" I was like, "Yes, totally." Anyway, so by sharing stories, you have the capacity to create some beautiful memories. You can create some inspiration. You can create some understanding and some empathy. And I think sharing stories, but sharing stories with integrity, you have a massive capacity to inspire somebody else. Tenacity is the last one, and that is to hold on or grip onto something tightly and with determination. And I heard this morning 3 very, very powerful words about ICPA, and it was ICPA doesn't give up. Now, those 3 very simple words create some real purpose and some real energy and a belief that you can do absolutely anything. And I think that sums up tenacity. I was quite tenacious at school, and I think my tenacity was that I was determined to hold on to my freedom at any cost. And I was at boarding. I went away to boarding school. I was very lucky. I got to go away to boarding school. And a couple of years ago, I spoke at the National Rural Women's Coalition Conference in Canberra, and I opened I don't know what I did. I did some speech, and one of the girls. It was almost like Moses parting the water, and I was in a crowd of 400 people, and Yvette McKenzie just came walking towards me, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I owe her such an apology," because I was year 8 and she was year 11. She nearly failed year 11 because of me, because I was so naughty. She was my senior in the boarding house. Anyway, I'll tell you this story because it just sort of shows that I was tenacious, although perhaps could have channeled my tenaciousness into something else. But she said to me, "Oh, Catherine, do you remember me?" And I said, "Ooh, Yes, I owe you a huge apology. I'm so sorry, Yvette. She said, oh yes, I nearly failed year 11 because of you. And I said, oh, I'm so, like, because she used to have me up until 1 o'clock in the morning holding textbooks or circling all the A's in the age or anything just to get me out so everyone else could sleep. And anyway, she said to me, she goes, oh, Catherine, that was, and I thought, she starts off and she said, oh, Catherine, that was one of the most inspirational speeches I've ever given. And I was like, oh, thank you. She goes, I genuinely thought you'd be in jail. I was like, oh, fabulous. Anyway, moving on. It's like, that's the biggest backhanded compliment, like with a piano, that I've ever had in my life. But anyway. So something else that I can share about tenaciousness, and I have been so blessed to have my mum. My mum, last weekend, we celebrated 25 years without our beautiful dad. And that was such a milestone for us because Mum had 4 kids and a farm and we were aged 5, 6, 7 and 9 when Dad died. And we have been through so much as a family. We've nearly lost the farm twice. We've been through fire. Our house burnt down 3 years ago. We've been through drought, flood, disease, management, markets, ups and downs, the wool, like just everything. And Mum has been so determined to hold on to that farm for one reason, and that was for her kids. And I absolutely admire. So whenever I think of tenaciousness, I straight away think of the strength and the courage that my mum has had. And I figure if I'm ever half the woman that my mother is, I will be very well served on this planet. So I guess with regards to tenaciousness, sometimes, like living in the bush, you're always going to have challenges. All of you will have been through everything. Or at least some of the things of what I just said, you know, fire, flood, drought, diseases, markets ups and downs, political instability, all of that sort of stuff. And the fact that you are all still there and still fighting and still holding on shows a massive amount of tenaciousness. I think sometimes, you know, you'll go through things that are uncomfortable, but and you might be so close to giving up that it's not funny. And you know what? Sometimes you might give up. I've given up. I gave up on influential women a couple of times, just for a couple of nights. And then there was something about me, and I was like, oh, I can't. I just got to keep going. But you know, it's the ability to work hard and have courage and flexibility and inner strength. And it means that, you know, you have the ability that when you're kicked in the guts, you get back up. And you get back up and you fight again. Sometimes things are going to be uncomfortable and sometimes they're going to be really, really tough. But it's important that you just saddle up and you get back on that horse. Because if you've got that goal, if you've got that end vision in place, you need to. Because no one else is going to do it for you. I think speaking of getting back up on your horse, I had 3 really bad falls about 3 years ago off horses. And I've ridden horses since I was 2. I broke my first horse in when I was 11. Mum took me down to have a look at how my horse was being broken in, and I saw the way that the bloke was doing it, and I tipped him off, got on and rode 11 kilometres home on this thoroughbred that had been ridden once, which my mum was not chuffed with. But anyway, I had 3 really bad falls in a row, and I lost my nerve. And it was the most horrific thing to be terrified of the thing you have been most passionate about your whole life. And in my recent trip to South America, I got tenacious again, I think. I don't really know what I got, but I just got determined. And I thought, rightio, well, no one's going to get back on a horse for you, sister, so you best be getting on with it. And the sense of achievement and pride and tears and overwhelming goodness in myself when I got on this horse and I rode up the mountain. And the lady who I told I was nervous, I said, look, I'm very, very scared. And we got to the top and she said to me, Catherine, do you want to go for a gallop across the flats? And we climbed up into Patagonia and there was just this massive open field. And I was like, rightio, let's roll. So we kicked them in the guts and took off flat gallop for about 1 kilometre. And I remembered how to canter and gallop. I was like, yes, how exciting. I'd only ridden for 30 years. But and just that sense of completely overwhelming satisfaction and happiness within myself that you get when you overcome challenges and you maintain that tenacious spirit that I know that you all absolutely have. I think, with regards to spirit, since I've been a tiny girl, I've always wanted to contribute and be involved in rural Australia. I will never work anywhere else. I will always have some sort of connection to rural Australia. I'm not a farmer. I personally don't have the brains to be a farmer. My brother and sister are very good farmers, but I got given the mouthy gene, so I like talking a lot. And I'm not like, I mean, the intricacies with running a farm at the moment absolutely blow my mind. But what I would love you to do is reflect on what is it that you are going to do with your spirit. So how are you going to maintain your sparkle? How are you going to find and maintain your passion? And what passion are you going to take on now? How are you going to use your imagination to create positive change, not only within your family and your business, but also your communities, so that it's long-lasting and you can enjoy it for many generations to come? What are you going to do to maintain resilience within yourself and in your community? And how are you going to maintain your integrity and tenacity? I think spirit really encompasses, in my mind, what is needed for people to really create change and live a balanced and high-achieving life with positive outcomes. You know, you can have passion, but without integrity or without sparkle, no one actually going to come along with you. Or you can have tenacity, but with no resilience and no imagination, you're not really going anywhere, you're just working hard. I think ICPA is an organisation that I hold so dear to my heart, and I'm constantly inspired by all of you, your stories, your journeys and your spirit. And I have a dream where rural families have access to the same education and the same resources that our people in the cities do, and that the spirit of people from the bush is celebrated and rejoiced. And I know that with you lot in this room here today, my dream is in very safe hands. Thank you.